There's a lot of talk in the news about the Fed and interest rates, the debt level for the US government. And I wanted to make this video to thank the Fed and the US government for managing our economy so well over the years. I don't think that too many people are giving these two institutions enough credit for a job very well done. I want to start in the 90s. If you are young, you might not be aware of, but there was something called the internet bubble in the 90s. Companies that had domain names that were ending in .com were worth millions of dollars. Clicks were more important than revenues and profits. Just companies with internet pages were being funded and money was being thrown at them. It was a lot of fun. Internet was hot. It was kind of like AI today. It was a lot of fun. We were going to live online. We were going to have sex online. We were going to have children online. Everything was going to be online. It was amazing. Of course, the internet bubble was fueled by cheap money. At that time, we had a genius Fed chairman, Alan Greenspan, who lowered interest rates aggressively from 1989 to 1993. And this was a paradise for internet companies, and things got absolutely out of control. Then the music stopped. The internet bubble popped, and this created a pretty significant recession, which was good, by the way. Recessions are good. And you might think, well, why are recessions good? Because recessions are the time where the economy can heal. The misallocations can be fixed. The bad companies that should have never been created go out of business. The good companies that should exist stay. People that worked for bad companies that should have never existed lose their job. Then they have to go and find jobs that are productive and actually useful. However, because the Fed and the US government decided that we're not going to have recessions anymore, recessions are bad, they together decided to help. As usual, the Fed cut interest rates aggressively, and the US government went from having a surplus to deficit. Whoa, wait a minute. The US government actually had a surplus? Yeah. Can you believe this? They actually had a surplus back then. But that was very unusual because over the last 55 years, only 5 years out of those 55, they had a surplus. And since 2001, this was the last time the US government had a surplus. I mean, why have a surplus if you can have a deficit? You know, surplus is not fun. Surplus doesn't get you elected, right? Why have surplus if you can have a deficit? So what was the result of the aggressive interest rate cuts and out of control government spending, which took us from surplus to deficit? Well, the result was the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Do you think the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis would have been possible without the low interest rates? Everybody was buying real estate. People with jobs, people with no jobs were able to buy real estate. People with real names, people with fake names, they were all able to buy real estate. Hell, even cats and dogs were able to buy real estate back then, fueled by cheap money. This crisis was so bad that the only other thing even close to this was the Great Depression in 1929. But the good thing is that the Fed and the US government, these two entities, were here to help us again. This time, however, we didn't have Alan Greenspan anymore. We had a bigger genius. We had no other than Ben Bernanke, who saved us. And he later received a Nobel Prize for saving us. We were very lucky to have him because, you see, Ben Bernanke was the expert on the Great Depression So he was definitely the right man for the job. He cut interest rates to zero and he kept them there for 6 years. Remember last time what happened when the interest rates were cut aggressively and stayed there for some time? You guessed it, the internet bubble. You see, but this time it was different. During the 90s, the rates didn't go to zero. They went to around 3% and they only stayed there for about 1 year. This time, however, the rates went to zero and they stayed there for 6 years. Can you imagine the fun that this is going to create? Last time, people were buying real estate with cheap money. And the time before, they were buying stocks or financing companies in the internet space. But at least there was something tangible behind these things. This time, you know where the liquidity went. This time, however, the liquidity went into buying pictures of monkeys and currencies backed by dogs. If you told me 20 years ago that there would be a time where people would be buying pictures of monkeys because it represented a status symbol, I would have never believed you. If you told me 20 years ago that people would be buying worthless currencies to protect them against inflation, I wouldn't have believed you. In other words, I wouldn't have believed you that people would be taking something that still has value and put it into something that's already worthless in order to protect them from inflation and whatever they have becoming worthless. I would not have believed you. But this is what we got. And I want to thank Ben Bernanke and the U.S. government for making all of this possible. And then in the middle of this, we got something different. We got COVID. The Fed cut interest rates again. But what the U.S. government did this time was truly something magical. In 24 months, the U.S. government had a deficit of $6 trillion. And in 2022, it added another 1.4 trillion in deficit. That's 7.3 trillion of deficit in 36 months. This alone deserves a Nobel Prize, don't you think? I mean, you give people money not to work. You give businesses loans that don't have to be paid back. And I don't even remember all the other nice things that they did for us to help us. Where did they get the money from, you might think? Well, they borrowed it, like they always do. In 2019, the debt was sitting at 23 trillion, and today it's sitting at 33 trillion. I mean, if somebody doesn't get Nobel Prize for this, I will be very upset. You might think, well, this is a recipe for inflation. You give people money not to work. You give businesses free money that doesn't have to be paid back. You run deficits. You print money. You add 10 trillion to the national debt that you know they won't pay it back. I mean, this will cause inflation, right? Why should we worry about small details like this? We always have the Fed and the U.S. government to help us. I mean, they help us avoid the recession early 2000. They help us avoid the next Great Depression in 2008, 2009. The Nobel Prize winner helped us get out of the mess, right? All of this created another bubble, and now inflation. I wouldn't worry though, because they will help us again. Actually, they're already helping us. I mean, they added $10 trillion worth of debt in just 4 years. But you know what? The good news is that the additional 10 trillion of debt was financed by low interest rates. Now inflation is running high and the Fed is helping. The Fed is helping by increasing interest rates for individuals, businesses, and the government. So now, if you want to buy a house and take a mortgage for $300,000, today this mortgage is costing you $2,300 per month. But before, it was only costing you $1,040 $400 per month. But the Fed is helping you. It's like the Fed is cutting off your arm and it's asking you if you want to have it reattached. Well, of course you want to have it reattached. I mean, it would have been better off if you didn't have it cut off, but since it's already cut off, it's nice that they're willing to help you reattach it. For businesses, the Fed is also helping here because a lot of small businesses, especially the ones that are not profitable yet, they have a hard time raising money today, and the Fed is helping. The Fed is helping them prepare for a funeral today. But the best part is the U.S. government. You see, usually the Fed and the U.S. government, they work together to help us. The Fed cuts interest rates, the U.S. government increases spending, borrows at those interest rates. But today, the Fed is raising interest rates after the government borrowed 10 trillion additional debt to help us on the top of the 22 they already had. So now they have $33 trillion. Can you imagine how fun this will be next year when about 10 trillion of it has to be refinanced at higher interest rates? Because today, the cost of servicing the current debt is now more than what the U.S. is spending on military. At 6%, $35 trillion at 6%, that's about $2 trillion. Well, in 2023, the U.S. government collected about $4 trillion of revenue. Can you imagine how fun it will be when half of the U.S. revenues will go to servicing the debt? I cannot wait for this, but I'm not going to worry because the Fed and the U.S. government will be always there to help us, like they were in the 90s, like they helped us with the 2009 financial crisis, like they helped us with COVID. I have no doubt about their ability to help. So in conclusion, I just wanted to congratulate the Fed and the U.S. government for a job well done. Keep up the good work.